This isn't as good without the tacos.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have any virtual tacos going on this one. For those folks that are here, we had a presentation last night over at the Perndale Grange, and there were some free tacos. So that was clearly the preferred location to be.
Yeah,
And the tacos are great too.
they were. I agree.
But the content is as good today. We're not discounting any of that. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone who carved out an hour of their precious time in the evening. So we're very, very appreciative of everyone who's joined us. So maybe we'll kick it off, Aura, and then have Glenn to kind of make the introductions after you started.
I'll defer to Glenn. So,
Okay.
Supervisor, it's all
Sure.
yours.
I'll start the introduction here then on this, and I want to thank everybody for attending this well registration program workshop webinar on this. And this is an important issue, important topic. I do know that well registration is not on most people's want to do list. And this is a program that is being administered by the county, but it is not really originated from the county. The origination really goes back to state law back in 2014 when the creation of SIGMA, which was a program put forth when Governor Brown was in to uh, to protect our groundwater resources around the state. And so any overdraft basins there are, and there, I don't know how many groundwater stability agencies there are, but there are quite a few up and down the state. There's one here in the Salinas Valley, and all these have to meet certain requirements and achieve groundwater sustainability by 2040, 2042, depending on the status of their basins. And that is really where it has been left with counties, with in the hands of these groundwater sustainability agencies, such as the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So we're really operating under the direction of the state and the requirements of the state. And if we do not comply with those directions, then it risks having the state step in and take over control and direction of our groundwater. So it is much preferable that we keep it as local as possible, and that is why we have this program going forth right here. I Before I'm going to pass it over to Paret or and Ara and Amy, I want to kind of define a little bit on different agencies. I think there's a lot of confusion, and it's rather understandable. There are a lot of different water agencies in this county, and within this basin, there are quite a few. Of course, many of you are going to be familiar with the Monterey County Health Department. It will have either been monitoring or gave approval for your construction of your wells, or it's monitored the uh, drinking water status of water systems. Their primary focus is on health and safe drinking water. The Salinas Valley Basin groundwater sustainability developed from the 2014 law to develop sustainability by 2040 or 2042. And their primary job is for long-term sustainability and also with the registry of the wells. Now, we also have the Monterey County Water Resources Agency, which has some overlapping jurisdiction. It's largely to manage our water resources. Their main job come with a lot of the waterways, but you'll probably be most likely to associate them with the two dams in Nacimiento and San Antonio, in which they are the primary responsibility. So, as I say, there are some overlapping to those two agencies, but both of them are helping out and assisting in the registering of these wells. And I'm going to pass it over here now to or Paret. I'll be on here in case anybody does have any other questions. But I do want to emphasize, while this is really being done at the county level, again, it's coming under state direction. There's not a great deal of leeway that we have on what we can do. And this is a mandatory requirement from the state, and the counties and these agencies in the county are taking part in this. And the consequences are if we don't proceed, we're going to have a state taking over the water resources, and that would be in my opinion, a very unfortunate thing. So I will pass it over to whoever's next.
Yeah, I think Perrette will pick it up from here.
I'll do that. Good evening, everyone. Perrette Harmon, General Manager at Salinas Valley Basin GSA. For short, we refer to ourselves SVB GSA, so you may have seen that acronym, or just GSA. And our partner agency, GMR, calls us SVB. So we don't discriminate. Call us whatever is comfortable. And thank you, Supervisor, for kicking this off. So there is the underlying regulatory framework, SGMA. SGMA stands for Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014. But also it's very important that we take care of our local shared pressures, resources, water supply. Even without SGMA, we know that we cannot live without water. We know, hopefully all of you know, that we do not get any water imported from state or federal water project. It's all local. It's majority of that is groundwater. And that's why SGMA was put in place, because it's out of sight, out of mind. It is underground, and it's really hard to really get a good sense of the condition and then manage it. So let me see here. I think we're gonna just go to the next slide. This one just connects the dots, as I already shared. We 90%, roughly 90% of our supply comes from groundwater, and we are entirely relying on local sources. The SVB GSA, we have 6 sub-basins we manage up and down the valley, and they are interconnected, but they are very, at the same time, unique in terms of their hydrogeology. They are unique and different from the type of pumping and pumpers, beneficial users and uses in each of them. So we the GSA, our goal is to manage it holistically and to make sure that all different parts of this valley have sustainable groundwater future. So let's go to the next slide, Amy. So already I touched upon this SGMA. You may see it here and there. The good thing, it was interesting that it took 100 years for the state to establish a regulatory framework for groundwater, because they got to that 100 years earlier for the surface water. It was 1914 when water rights were put in place, and 2014 the state realized that there needs to be a better way of managing groundwater. A good thing about that law is that the state first looked at local agencies. They do want and trust that locals know the conditions the best, know what works the best, and therefore the new agencies were created. So the SVB GSA, we are the new kid on the block, formed in 2016-17 timeframe, and we definitely want to not add a whole lot of burden on all of you groundwater users. So we are working very closely with existing water agencies, and Monterey County Water Resource Agency has been our partner since the conception. It was already mentioned, the state intervention. I think the next slide will kind of help to really lay out what are we trying to do here. So that's in SGMA, in the law, is we have 6 indicators that we are using to determine if we are if we're managing the groundwater basin sustainably. The first one makes the most sense for all of you here, lowering groundwater levels. If you are relying on your own well, you know very well that if the groundwater levels drop, it could end in a dry well situation, or just your energy cost for pumping goes up if you're pumping from a different level. Seawater intrusion is the next indicator, also a big challenge in in one of our subbasins, but also the neighboring subbasins are not foreign to that. They are contributing to the seawater intrusion in certain respect. Storage reduction, that is a kind of calculation from groundwater levels. So of course, if you pump out more water and the groundwater levels go down, then there is less water in storage remaining. The other three down below, we also have to meet the criteria for that, but it's less of a probably concern for most of you. So degraded quality, not the quality what many of us think about, the nitrates or anything that could be coming from Superfund sites. This is very specific water quality that is connected to the groundwater law. Land subsidence, we are fortunate, we don't have that in this region. And the surface depletion, we're still waiting for more guidance from the State Department of Water Resources on how exactly we need to be evaluating that. But essentially, we need to make sure that our overpumping or withdrawing the groundwater levels down, it does not impact adversely the surface water sources of rivers and creeks. So let's go to the next one. And so we do have challenges here. We do have problems we need to solve. We have 4 subbasins that are unsustainable as they currently stand. So we need to achieve sustainability by 2040. In one of the subbasins by 2042, we were given 20 years. And then once we get to sustainability, hopefully that's our marching orders at the moment. We need to maintain the sustainability for another 30 years. So Sigma timeline, combined timeline is 50 years, first 20 to get there, and then the other 30 to make sure we're not falling back. For those subbasins that are sustainable, it is less critical because there's no the criteria to achieve, but maintaining is equally good. If we have regions that are in better condition, we want to make sure that they don't drop out of that sustainable condition. So our direction there is our mandate there is to maintain sustainability. And seawater intrusion is here on the map. You can kind of see, hopefully put yourself and where your home or your parcel or your well is, can orient yourself maybe from sloughs up there, Moss Landing. So it is an area close to coast, and the seawater intrusion has been occurring there since last century, almost 80 years, 1940s. And it keeps moving inland. So we definitely need to address that, stop it, and hopefully push it back a bit towards the ocean there. Declining groundwater levels. We have documented declines in most of the subbasins. Already mentioned what comes of it, dry wells, and that's where you all come in, because most of the private wells that provide water for domestic uses, those tend to be shallower, and those are at risk going dry first if we get into a major drought or if we continue seeing declining groundwater levels. And of course, increasing demand. It's a balance. Water budgets are very similar to any financial budget. There is the income side and expense side for water budgets. It's the recharge and then demand or how much is pumped out. So if the demand increases but the recharge doesn't, we need to come up either with supplemental supply projects or balance the water budgets by finding ways to be more efficient with using the water and on the demand side. So that's a lot of Sigma talk, but that's kind of not why you are here. It's just trying to set the context for what's to come and the groundwater management, groundwater GMP, groundwater monitoring program. So the next one, I believe, is Aura, your slide. Yes, GMP. So I'll hand it over to you. And this is the true partnership because we found someone, another agency that has had been doing similar activities for many decades. And instead of us creating our own program, we turned to them, and they gracefully accepted our inquiry and our offer to partner on this. So, Aura.
Yeah, thank you, Perrette. Good evening, everyone. Ara Ajdarian, General Manager, Water Resources Agency. Before I start, Cheryl, I see you have a question in the chat, and we will circle back on questions once we come through the presentation. So we'll definitely address your question then. As Brett had indicated, the Water Resources Agency had been doing groundwater monitoring for decades. We've been monitoring water levels since the late 1940s, water quality since the 1960s, and extraction since the 1990s. And so we had a lot of experience in this area, a lot of insight into this area, a lot of data that had been collected, the equipment and so forth. And so when we think about 2014 and the state um, finally regulating groundwater, um, the Salinas Valley Basin GSA was formed in 2017. And during that same time, essentially, the California Department of Water Resources was going through its exercise to identify groundwater basins throughout the state. And while the agency had defined certain spaces and we had monitoring frequencies that suited our own purposes, the state defined a space slightly different than we had. And so that left the Salinas Valley Basin GSA in an awkward spot. Were they to stand up a parallel program to what we were doing? Were they, take the whole thing over? They're a lean, mean planning machine. And so ultimately, as Pred had indicated, the decision was made to leverage the experience that the agency had so that we could maximize the efficiency of the work that we do. So the groundwater monitoring program is more than just well registration, but well registration is the core of the rest of the program, because if we don't know where the wells are, how we monitor or the decisions we make about monitoring change. And so, there's the old adage about we can't manage what we can't measure. And so this begins with well registration. And so we can go to the next slide. So for since the 1990s, agricultural wells up and down the Salinas Valley have been registered and have been reporting usage. And the standards that the Water Resources Agency established in the early 1990s, again, were different than what the state established in 2014. And so we had to figure out how to align that. And so under the old standards, the agency required registration and reporting from wells that had a discharge pipe greater than 3 inches. It wasn't volumetric. And the state, as they developed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, they determined that the new threshold for reporting would be 2 acre-feet per year, which is often referred to as de minimis. And so that's where the reporting threshold comes in. But for registration, it's important that all wells register, whether they need to report or not. And there's several reasons for this. First off, the data that the Water Resources Agency has from history is really the agricultural production wells and the larger industrial production wells. And so it's the first time that we're trying to collect information on domestic wells. And it's important that we collect this information because domestic wells are most at risk if there are disruptions in groundwater, either levels or quality. And so knowing where they are is important. As an example, a parcel could be large, and some parcels have a lot of elevation variation. And if the well's on top of a 100-foot knoll as opposed to down in a valley, it can very much change the characteristics of the well and therefore the targets that we need to manage for. Drought response is important. This was a big catalyst for Sigma. The state really got energized in the multi-year drought that occurred in the early 20 teens. And that's really what brought Sigma into play. Earliest versions of Sigma really contemplated a state-controlled program. But local agencies, push back on that for the reasons Pred had indicated earlier, because locally we understand our groundwater resources the best. We understand how not only how to manage them, but the folks that we need to work with to be successful in all of this. And so ultimately, local control was allowed, but there is the backup or the backstop of the state stepping in, as Supervisor Church had mentioned early on. And so maintaining that local control is vital for us to be able to really define what the future of our shared resource looks like. And then ultimately, well registration, these are important points. It's not a pumping tax. In order to initiate this version of our groundwater monitoring program, we adopted an ordinance in 2024, in October of 2024. And that ordinance, is clear that while there is a cost to the program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, those costs aren't going to be recovered through extraction fees. And certainly this isn't, any sort of water rights determination as well. This is just a program to monitor, our groundwater basins so that we can set appropriate management targets in the future. So next slide, please. So who needs to register? All wells need to register. So the preponderance of the wells, it is Pred had indicated, there are 6 subbasins within the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, and the ratio of domestic wells versus ag wells is different in all of them. But all wells, we are looking for all wells to register. Agricultural wells, the majority of them have been registered for a long time, and we've had a high voluntary compliance rate from the ag industry. Water system wells have the larger ones that feed many of the cities up and down the Salinas Valley. Have been reporting their usage. What hasn't historically been registered is the domestic wells, which is why we're doing this outreach now, and trying to reach out to folks and sort of educate them on why it's important, what we need. And so next slide, please.
Or if I may add, so the
Sure.
small water systems, especially the ones that are 5 to 14 connections, also have not been on anybody's radar. The larger ones, up from 15, they've been reporting to the state, but the small ones, so it's not just one well, one household, definitely the small ones. And then we do have those geographic areas that you already mentioned, that were kind of white areas that you had not been collecting from their data, and now they are within our boundaries. So if you're not sure, please reach out to either the phone number or email address that we're providing at the end to make sure that are you one of the ones that has to or not.
Yeah.
So sorry, back to you.
No, that's good clarity, Pred. I appreciate that. And so what is the information required to register? It's the well owner. Um, and in some cases, then it's the well operator. It isn't always the same uh, entities or individuals. We recognize that. Parcel number and address are how we link things together. The location of the well is very helpful. Again, if the land is undulating, if we know where the well is, it's very important information to have. People ask, well, how do I measure the location, if you will? And what we recommend is, for those with smartphones, um, you can walk out and just pin it and provide us the information that way. Otherwise, as Brett had indicated, there's a phone number that you can address, and we can help folks with mapping. So there are a number of different ways to do that. The well type is important, and so we're re-including agricultural here because there are some small ranchette users that would have a smaller than a 3-inch outlet, which was the old standard, but pumping more than 2 acre-feet. And so we would want to know that kind of usage. And to the extent that there's information about the characteristics of the well, that's very important and very helpful for us to know. It's perhaps one of the most important pieces of information, because if the information we have suggests that the preponderance of wells in a region, and again, remember, we're doing this on a region-wide basis over, thousands and tens of thousands of acres. And if the preponderance of wells appear to be at, for example, 300 feet, and there's a number of domestic wells at 100 feet, but we don't know that, then we set the wrong target. And those wells that haven't shared the information about their characteristics are at risk. And so well depth, to the extent that it's known, is very helpful. Next slide, please. So there are a number of different ways to register. You can go online. There's a digital registration that's been created. At both the Salinas Valley Basin GSA website and the Water Resources websites, you'll find frequently asked questions. So there's a series of questions and answers there. You'll find other information that we've posted. This presentation will be posted. There've been other, sort of broadcasts about this as well. So there's a lot of information there. There are paper forms. Not everyone has a computer, or they prefer the non-battery required version. And so there are paper forms that we can provide to you, and then of course in-person help. And so people can call, people can come in. We're trying to make this as accessible and as easy and as supportive as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So, how will the data be used? So certainly, I might have put these in a different order. Understanding impacts of regional groundwater level conditions is probably the most important thing we're seeking to do. And why are we doing that? And it's protecting domestic wells. Certainly, it's protecting all well users. Again, this is a shared resource, like the air we breathe. And so, understanding how we're all connected, even though it's out of sight and out of mind, we are all connected through this hydraulic gradient. And so protecting domestic and all wells. Drought response planning is important, understanding, those variations in groundwater level. And then, of course, just, meeting the Sigma requirements. And that's, there are the mandates of the law that have to be met. And so, we share the responsibility in achieving that. But, I tend to focus more on this is where we live. This is the groundwater we rely on. And so, we want it to be there for our kids and their kids and so forth. And so I really look at it more in that context. And so, anyways, next slide, please. So I think, equally important is what isn't, what information isn't used for. So personal information is not shared. We take this information and we roll it up into an aggregate And so that individual information is not available. Um, this is again is not tied to property taxes or a water billing. The monitoring program informs management, and management programs, will have a cost associated with them, and those will have to be dealt with. But this is really about growing the understanding of our shared resource. Data is not, an enforcement tool. It's really used to just help inform the management decisions that will have to be made as we go forward, and those will vary region by region. So we'll come to the next slide, and there's a number of different ways to access us, either the Salinas Valley Basin GSA or the Water Resources Agency. And so we'll hold this slide here, and then we will pivot to questions. And I appreciate that folks have been putting them in the chat. And if folks want to um, raise their hands, and we can also dialogue if that's preferred. So Cheryl, you were the first one to dive in with a question. And so I can read it for you, or if you'd like to open your mic and ask it, I'll leave it to you. Okay. Cheryl's question was, does this open the door to the county metering our individual residential wells? And I'll hand that question over to Paret.
Oh, of course. Of course you do.
Yeah.
So I want to preface that I don't know what may happen in 10, 20, 50 years. None of us thought that we would be ordering food, via computer and track where our pizza delivery is. So I think it's amazing how use of data and collection of data has changed. But I know for sure that immediately there is no reason or no desire to do that, either county or from on behalf of the GSA. The residential use makes up relatively small portion of the total pumping, although I think it is very important I'm thinking most of you came to this webinar because you live in District 2 or somewhere in North County. So the District 2, it's called Langley Sub-Basin for us around Prunedale, and you wouldn't know where the basin, sub-basin boundaries are, but they exist for us. Over in that part, it's the majority of the pumping is by domestic users, not ag. So where there's a high concentration of residential or domestic pumping, I think you may want to do that just for your own sake, because we're really trying to protect you. And so I think a couple of ideas I have for you. We don't need to collect it, but you may want to know yourself, either for even just leaks, for example. That's something that I came from an urban system, and it was amazing when we allowed our customers to get access to their own water use live, pretty much, that they had alarms that was set up, that they got text when then water went through the meter, and they called us like, what do you mean it's going through the meter? Like, I'm not using it. It was like, that's exactly the point. You may not be aware of how water gets wasted through leaks, because there's, again, no good indicator. But Cheryl, to answer your question, that knowing where your well is, I don't think it's any less or more of what comes next indicator for, and at this point there is no intention from GSA to meter individual wells.
Yeah, and there are, under the ordinance that we adopted for the groundwater monitoring program, we identified a number of different ways for those who report to measure their usage. And so it could be an electrical meter conversion, it could be a water meter. But it's important to remember, Cheryl and others, that at this stage, what are referred to as de minimis water users, people who are using less than 2 acre-feet per year, that there isn't a reporting requirement. And we understand we do want folks to register, and there's an opportunity now and through the end of this month to register for free, and that's a nice bonus. Um, but we also understand that most folks with domestic wells, don't have meters. And, sort of the rule of thumb that we're using is, if it's more, I want to say, Pred, if it's more than 4 connections, 5, right? There's a
It's
threshold
more
there.
than four, five and up. Yep.
So if it's 4 connections or less on a well, there's currently no reporting requirement. In that 5 to 14 range, and then 15 to 199. We recognize that, currently the state, and I think in the future, the state is going to be monitoring those wells, and their requirements will be different than ours. But yeah, as Brett says, we are really, in terms of usage, focused more on those larger production wells at this time. Anna, do you want, living in Aromas but on the San Benito County side, would you like to ask your question, or I can read it for you if you want to raise your hand?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually got the answer from Amy, so I don't really
Oh,
have to go over it again. But yeah, I've subscribed to Supervisor Church's newsletter, and I get so much great information. We're on a shared well. I don't manage it, but this is really good to know. I'm going to make a phone call and just find out when we may be subject to these registration because we are literally 100 feet from Monterey County. So
yeah.
but everything we don't get anywhere near as much good guidance as you guys provide. So
Well, and
thank
in
you.
the Langley area where you're located or near there, it's challenging too because to the northern end of that you also have the Pajaro Valley Water Management District, and so there's a
Right.
lot of us involved in this. Amy, you want to speak momentarily about the mapping tool that we have, and if folks call and give us their parcel number, we can zero them in on a map and explain if they're in or out of particular spaces.
Yeah, happy to do that. So on the Water Resources Agency, on our well registration page, there is kind of an interactive map that you can click on and put your address in, and it will, show you which subbasin you're in, if you're in one of the ones that is managed by the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. So that can help to, clarify, does this apply to me or not? And again, like Ara mentioned, we are happy to help answer those types of questions too. If can't find the page or it's not working for some reason, sometimes it can be a little trickier if you're on a mobile device. But also, please don't hesitate to reach out either by email or the phone number that's up on the screen right now. This 831-755-8905, and we can help you that way too.
I did do that, by the way, and that's how I knew I don't have to register right now.
Well, I'm glad it worked for you.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
thank you.
feedback.
I appreciate that comment very much. As I had mentioned earlier, the agency's been interacting with um, larger well owners and operators for decades, and we understand that world pretty well. Working with domestic well owners and in new geographic spaces where we're out here trying to find what we don't know, and so we're doing the very best we can. So I'm glad you got an answer to your question and so forth. Let's see. Next, Margie K, you were observing that the Langley is next to the 18400, and that District 2 covers both. And so, were you asking a question or were you just clarifying that point?
Clarifying because not all of us are in the Langley.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
all.
Good point. And so, yeah, again, if you're wondering which subbasin you're in, feel free to call that number. Next up, I think, Horacio, I think you're up next.
Hi, this is Horacio. I have a few questions. So, is everyone that is in the county have to register? Doesn't matter what kind of well it is, or just on the GSA?
Just within the GSA, so what's called the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin. And if you go to either the SVB GSA website or the Water Resource Agency website, and you look for those frequently asked questions, there's a map in there that, illustrates the extent of the groundwater basin. And then, as Amy just indicated, there is an interactive map that you can use to enter in your specific information and answer your question.
Okay. Second question. Once they register, do they have to pay fees?
Yeah, so there's more to the groundwater monitoring program than just registration. And the answer to your question is we're working through that. And so this is the first year of the program. And this year, we were able through the SVB GSA, we were able to secure grant funding from the state, which is why we're encouraging everyone now to register because it's free. Um, that may or may not change in the upcoming fiscal year, which begins in July, depending on a number of different factors. And so right now it's unknown how future costs will be covered. There could be a fee. There was a rate study that was produced 2 years ago that indicates what the fee may be, and the fee is dependent on what sub-basin you are in, because different sub-basins have different requirements. And so again, if you call that number, and give them your information on where your well's located, they can tell you if you're in or you're out, and then they can tell you what the range of costs could be in the future, depending.
Okay. I have one more question.
Of course.
Can can the farmers or the well owners can they learn how to measure the water levels, or do you have any workshops or something to learn?
Well, I would say two different things there, Horacio. So there are a number of growers that, for their own purposes, maintain information about water levels on their wells. And so that is possible. I'm not sure that we've ever had a workshop, and I would defer to Amy. But there is equipment that, growers or well owners can purchase that can provide that information. Again, that's information that individuals collect for their own reasons. For our purposes here, in terms of complying with the state mandates, it isn't helpful, right? And so when the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was enacted, it basically said, "Thou shall monitor and manage all uses and all users of groundwater." And so it's the Salinas Valley Basin GSA that has that responsibility and that relationship with the state, to demonstrate that we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing so as to avoid state intervention in the future. And so there are sort of two different things there.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And again, feel free to call the number and give them your location information, and I think they can answer a lot of your specific questions.
Thank you.
Of course.
So, all right, don't see any more hands or chat questions, but we do have one more workshop coming. So I'd like to make sure that people know that there is another opportunity. If you liked it so much, please come back. Or this is recorded, so we will put it up on both websites, the SVBGSA and Monterey County Water Resource Agency website. So if you have any neighbors, friends, anyone that lives in the vicinity or in one of those basins, please direct them to those resources, and also the phone number, email. We could not have Supervisor Daniels here today. It was co-sponsored, and thank you again, Supervisor Church. It was super helpful. Your reach is much more efficient than our attempts to get to the people in your district. So very appreciated. But Kate Daniels also wants to help, and the workshop on March 11th, that's an in-person workshop, and I'm the time, Amy or somebody, do we have the time?
I want to say it's 2 to 4. Give me a second here.
I think Sarah, we have you two here, if you know the time.
It is 2 to 4.
2 to 4. So 2 to 4, starting at 2 o'clock, and the location, I'm looking again for help for people who helping us to put those on Cypress Church. So that's the next
on
workshop.
Yep, that's the Cypress Church on Highway 68.
Thank you, Sarah. So that's hosted by Supervisor Daniels, and please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to our staff. We really want to help you. We want to make sure that we are working together, protecting the shared resource, and we are on your team.
Indeed. Okay.
So I think with that, I don't think, unless there's any last minute, either questions, comments, we've got some thank yous. Appreciate you all coming, and have a wonderful evening.
Enjoy, everybody, and thank you again for the time. We understand how busy life is, and so we really appreciate you taking it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.